Hello, and welcome to MBTI Basics. I'm pretty much going to teach you the fundamentals of MBTI. If you're into MBTI, you'll notice that there's a ton of videos here on YouTube that talks about the theory, but to be honest, a lot of the people talking about it don't know what they're talking about.
Shots fired! Shots fired!
This isn't to say that there aren't videos on YouTube that know what they're talking about in regards to MBTI. It's just that they get bogged down by the many videos of individuals that don't really have a good grasp of the theory. So it's kind of like looking for a needle in a haystack. The needle being quality videos, while the haystack being the videos with misinformation. So I hope to help with this video, so that I guess the theory can be better understood by those that are new to it. So I'm like, hey, if they're spreading misinformation, what's the worst that I could do if I like to know the theory? So yeah, I'm pretty much gonna teach you guys how the theory works fundamentally. So you're about to learn the fundamentals. So we're gonna go ahead and start off with what the MBTI is. Essentially, it's like a personality trait instrument. So like you take a test and then they tell you what personality you are, and then they tell you like behaviors associated with that type or whatever, and they like to show the percentage in the population or whatever. And that's pretty much what the MBTI is. There are free tests online, like if you check Google or whatever search engine you use, you can probably find some. But the difference between taking a test and understanding how the theory works is, well, it's like night and day. The people that just take the test don't really understand why they are that particular type, and that's why they get to these bouts of, I don't know which type I am. I'm between these two and I'm one letter off. These are things that you'll probably hear. So pretty much what people don't understand when they take the test is that they're scratching the surface. There's a theory behind the test, but they're just taking a test. And when you take a test, well, they want you to pay for it. If you think about it, they have paid tests available online that are supposed to be the most accurate, but they are no more accurate than like the other tests, to be honest. The tests aren't really all that accurate from my experiences. Maybe you had something different, but from the people that I've talked to, the tests are very inaccurate because people are inaccurate. The way that you answer the questions aren't always, well, I don't want to say truthful, but for people that are familiar with the theory, they'll alter their results so they can get a certain type, so they can get the accolades that come with that type. Apparently, if you're INTJ, you'll just be a mastermind and super smart, and if you're super special, you'll be INFJ, and if you're ESTP, you'll be good at sports, and bullshit stereotypes that they associate with the types, which is pretty much not true. So that's why the tests aren't exactly the most accurate. People make the tests inaccurate. So if you want to learn your type, I recommend you learn how the theory works, and I'm here to help guide you into this. So I'm going to go ahead and start you off with the basics. This was made by Carl Jung, and he essentially said that there are two types of people. I'm pretty sure you've heard these words, but in MBTI, they get a definition switch. I'm pretty sure you've heard of introverts and extroverts, right? Introverts being shy people, and extroverts being outgoing people. And outside of MBTI, that's correct. But inside of the theory, that's not what those words mean. They have their roots in psychology. So introverted people are subject-based. Subject in psychology, I'm the subject, and that's what an introvert is. And extroverts are object based individuals. So object, see, object, I'm a subject, this is an object, and that's how introversion and extroversion goes in MBTI terms. And whether you're an introvert or an extrovert in MBTI depends on the direction of your first cognitive function or your dominant function. What's a cognitive function, you ask? I'm glad you asked. So a cognitive function is essentially your cognition process, your thought process, if you will. So MBTI has to do with your cognition, not behavior. A lot of people think it has to do with behaviors, and they think like certain types behave a certain way. So if you want to be a certain type, you have to behave a certain way. You don't magically become a type if you behave like them. It doesn't work. It just doesn't. But some people are adamant and believing that if they act like an INTJ, and they will become an INTJ. That doesn't work. INTJs are INTJs because they have introverted intuition as their dominant function, followed by extroverted thinking. That's what makes them INTJ. Not the behaviors that they do. But hey, some people believe otherwise, so that's how that goes. So pretty much you have these two groups of functions. You have your perceiving functions, which are sensing and intuition. And pretty much sensing has to do with the five senses, so empirical data, if you will. And intuition has to do not so much with the five senses. It's like metaphysical stuff. So you don't have to physically or empirically experience things, but you can abstractly experience them. And perceiving functions, primary reason for being is to collect data. That's it. They just look at the world and collect data. And then you have your judging functions, which are like your thinking functions, which are using logic to come to conclusions, and your feeling functions, which is coming to conclusions based on personal values, beliefs, etc. Just because you're a feeler doesn't really make you emotional. That's a common mistake that people make, because they're like, oh, you're a feeler, so you're super emotional. No, that's not necessarily true. So you have your four functions. You have your thinking, feeling, sensing, intuition, and all of those can either be introverted or extroverted. And that's the basics of that's pretty much the bread and butter of this. If you understand the cognitive functions, you'll learn a lot about yourself and your type. But if you don't, you're gonna be reading a lot of profiles and taking a lot of tests. So yeah, I recommend you use this route. So pretty much you have your top four preferences or your top four cognitive functions, and that's what makes you your MBTI type. And when I say preferences, normally I would use the example of you prefer your right hand or your left hand. But when I try to explain this to people, they're like, well, I use both hands evenly. And I completely missed the point. So I'm going to use another example. Let's say that you like playing video games. You like Street Fighter. Everyone should know what Street Fighter is, or familiar with it in some sense. And your best character is Ryu. So you like to use Ryu under most circumstances. This is not to say that you cannot use anybody else in the roster, but you're most comfortable when you play as them. If you use someone other than Ryu, it will require more concentration, thus stress and or strain you, because you're not comfortable with their playstyle. If you're playing with Ryu, you got like a lot of quarter circle forward. He's very beginner friendly, if you will. And characters like Guile and Bison, they have like charge attacks where you gotta hold back and then push forward and then a button, and that's how you do their special moves. Or hold down and then push up and then hit a button, and that's how they do their special moves. Like Guile's Flash Kick and Bison's Psycho Crusher. And if you're used to playing a Ryu, that's going to be like foreign territory. So you're not used to it. So you got to really think when you're in a match playing with those types of characters. Now, if you had someone come up and say, hey man, I heard you're good at Street Fighter and I'm about to kick your ass, and this was your first time playing them, who would you pick? Well, you'd pick who you're comfortable playing with, right? In this case, you'd likely pick Ryu. And that's how preferences work in MBTI. Now that I've explained how preferences work, I'll continue. So pretty much you have your dominant function. This is your pretty much most natural function that you use. You're more comfortable with it. It takes the least amount of energy, so you use it the most. Therefore, it dominates the rest of the functions. Then you have your auxiliary function. It pretty much supports your dominant function. So if your dominant function's like, let's say Batman, your auxiliary is like Robin, and it's there to pretty much provide support for Batman. I like comics, so I use comic examples, so I guess get my point across. Your tertiary function, you don't have as much control over. So some call it like the childish function, or the relief function as well. So this is like, you have like an immature control over it. So you don't use it as well as someone who has like that function in their dominant or auxiliary. So and it's also used to like give your dominant function a break, from what I've read in a couple of sources. Your inferior function is pretty much the function you don't have a great grasp over. Like it's the complete opposite of your dominant function. So it really stresses and strains you when you try to use it. Therefore, when you're stressed the stress happens because you can't use your dominant function, you use your inferior function. just badly in comparison to someone who uses it as their dominant or auxiliary. Some of you might be asking yourselves, well, what's stopping a person from having like extroverted sensing and extroverted intuition one after another? So yeah, there's a system in place for how the cognitive functions come together. If you have an extroverted perceiving function, the next thing you're going to get is an introverted judging function. And pretty much that's how that goes. So like if you have TE and you going by the theory, which you should, the next functions that you can get are either SI or NI, period. That's it. You can only go two paths. So like that's why I'm urging you, if you're trying to find your MBTI type, find your dominant function. If you find your dominant function, then you're going to only have two paths that you can take. If you're a TE Dom, you can go the SI path and be an ESTJ, or you can go the NI path and be ENTJ. Both of those types have TE as their dominant function, but they just split. That's it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
But pretty much you have your pairs of cognitive functions. Like I mentioned earlier, you have your perceiving and your judging functions. But the way that they're ordered, there's a system for it. I got a cheat sheet for you guys, just to give you some insider information, some pro tips. This isn't really insider information. This is very easily findable on the internet, but I'm just going to put it here for you guys. So pretty much this is how it goes. Introverted intuition, aka NI, is always paired with extroverted sensing, aka SE. Extroverted feeling, aka FE, is always paired with introverted thinking, aka TI. Extroverted intuition, NE, is always paired with introverted sensing, aka SI. Introverted feeling, aka FI, is always paired with extroverted thinking, aka TE. So NI goes with SE, FE goes with TI, NE goes with SI, and FI goes with TE. They use abbreviations so people don't have to say the long word. So, in other words, if your dominant function is TE, then by default, your inferior function is going to be FI. Alternatively, if your auxiliary function is TE, by default, your tertiary function is going to be FI. That's what happens when you stay within the system that people aren't aware of when they take these tests. So pretty much the functions go together to balance each other out. And that's how you get like this spectrum in MBTI. That's supposed to set it apart from like other instruments where they just say like you have a deficiency and like a scale. Like they have a one side that you have everything you need and the other side you're lacking. That's how other personality tests work, from my understanding when I did my research for this. But with MBTI, you're on the spectrum. There's no right or wrong. You're just there. And it's where you stand is your preference. So if you prefer thinking to feeling, then you'll likely have a thinking function in your higher, well, probably your top two, because you prefer it. So pretty much these functions go together like Deadpool and breaking the fourth wall. You can't really split them up in that sense. So if you have problems finding your dominant function, it is possible to work backwards. So think about what you're like when you're stressed and what stresses you out. And that's likely the opposite of your dominant function, which you're comfortable using. And that's a way to discover that. You're going to want to look into Naomi Quink's Eruption of the Inferior. Pretty much it talks about inferior function eruptions. So when you're stressed, like you're not you. She has a book, Was That Really Me? I'll link that in the description below. And I'll also link the MBTI Manual 3rd edition in the description below, which has pretty much all the information I talked about. And they also have statistical data if you're into that. So I guess in recap, the TLDR, if you want to find your MBTI type, find your dominant function. And then from there, you can only branch to two paths. So you've taken 16 types and narrowed it down to two. But hey, that's just my 2 cents. So Robert was here, but now he's going to go and do other things. Probably go play some video games. So have a wonderful day.